Welcome everyone. Come on in, grab a seat, and we'll get started in a few minutes here. We're so excited to have everyone tuning in with us. This is kind of a new venture for us, this webinar, and it's just so much fun to see everyone joining us. So thanks so much for taking the time. I'm just going to run through some quick kind of housekeeping. I'll explain to you how this format is going to work, and we'll just give people a few more minutes to get into the webinar. But before I do that, why don't you guys introduce yourselves? I'll start I'll share the slides. Don, why don't we start with you?
Sure. Hi there, I'm Don Murray, and I'm one of the founders at SAFE, and I spend a lot of time thinking about FME Server, and with the folks on this call and others at SAFE, we collectively build the vision of where we're going to go, and I'm happy to be part of that and to share that with you. So yeah, really looking forward to this.
Yeah, it's going to be awesome. Laura.
Hi. Yeah, my name is Laura Wu. So I'm one of the team leads on our FME Server experts team. So I've been at SAFE for a little over 9 years now. So I've seen a lot of what people are up to with Server. So I'm excited to see what kind of questions come in for sure today. So
Yeah, no, you guys are in really awesome hands. I think, yeah, Laura has been doing webinars at SAFE for quite a few years now. And Laura, I think any webinar you do usually ends up being one of our top ones. So you guys are in very good hands. And then I'll introduce you guys to Erin as well.
Yeah, hi. So I'm Erin Lemke, and I lead the product marketing team. I've been at SAFE for just over a decade, and I actually remember having the first conversation with Don about launching FME Server for the first time and how excited we were. I'll never forget sitting in the room for that. So yeah, so I'm really happy to be on the call today, and I'll be taking a look at all the questions you guys are sending in and reading them on air so that Don and Laura can answer them.
Yeah, good. Yeah.
No, so yeah, Erin's going to be, I'm going to pass this over to her in a few minutes and she's going to end up moderating it for you. But let me explain kind of how this Q&A is going to work, because we have a couple of different options on how you guys can ask questions. So the first option is actually going to be the second one. It's the traditional kind of through text. So if you open the GoToWebinar panel, you will see there's a little box that says questions and a little like section where you can type in your question to hit send. So that's the first way to ask questions. And why don't you just test it out now? We'll make sure it's working. You can either type in where you're from or if you have a pet tuning in with you. I'm gonna have to live through everyone. I don't have a pet here.
I guess we should all answer that. How many of you guys have pets?
I do have a golden retriever. Yeah. And a cat. And
Nice.
yeah, so it's a lot of fun. Yeah.
Oh yeah, no
golden
pets.
retrievers get you outside walking, even if it's a torrential downpour in Vancouver. So
yeah.
And they're just friendly, right? They're just always happy to see you and always up for sharing food.
I know, pets are the real winners of 2020 this year.
Oh my goodness, yeah, I think they're all dependent now, right? They're used to people being around 24/7, whereas, so I think there's going to be a lot of stressed out pets when we all get back.
French bulldog, couple of people with cats.
Yeah.
Yeah, 4 cats and a dog, that's awesome. And people tuning in from all over the world, Ireland, Norway, Phoenix, Whitehorse. Oh, yeah. So exciting. Nottingham, so awesome.
And
so
some
yeah,
people
everyone,
everyone said his dog really is sick of him being around all the time. He wants some, he's stressed out. He just wants some peace and quiet. Why don't you go out?
That's funny.
That's funny. Yeah.
Cool. Okay, so that's the first way that people can ask questions there, is just by typing into that panel. And like we said, this is a Q&A webinar. We have nothing prepared for this webinar. This webinar is going to be driven by you and the questions coming in. So we encourage everybody to ask a question. If we don't get to it on the air, we will follow up with it after. So please do ask questions. We really want to see them coming in. Yes, good question. It is being recorded and it will be shared out after. And then the second way to ask a question is if you want to do it in person. This is a really fun feature to bring in because we love seeing everyone in person. We really miss the world tour, the UC, where we get to have kind of those hallway conversations of just talking to people face to face, and we wanted to bring that back. So if you want to talk with us face to face, we're going to use that hand raising feature. You can all test it now too. Don't worry, I won't bring you on the air, but if you click on that button, just to make sure it works, you can put your hand up, and then you can also click to put it down. And what I'm going to do right now is I'm just going to lower everybody's hand if you accidentally raised it. And then from this point forward, if your hand is raised, we will look to bring you on the air. If that is something that you want to do, just make sure that you are in a good location, like don't be driving or anything, and just have good internet, and I will prompt you to unmute and share your webcam. So it's definitely an option. It would be really fun to see a lot of you in person.
Yeah, for sure.
I think with that,
okay,
should I
talk about what I'm hoping to get from this?
Yes, sorry, John. Yeah.
So first of all, thanks so much for joining. It's great. One of the things that I've always enjoyed, and I know Laura and Aaron and the whole team really enjoyed, was when we did the world tour, we would go out, as Stephanie mentioned, and we would meet people, and we'd have these great conversations, and that gave us an opportunity to share what we're doing. But more importantly, it got us, information on what you would like to see in the product. The product is a work in progress, and so we're hoping to, there's those things we didn't know we weren't doing that we should do that are important. And so that's, another valuable thing from this. So, we know the product's not perfect. We continue to work to make it better and better, to solve more and more problems. So we really are looking forward to you sharing with us the things that you would like to see in FME Server that that are not there. So this is, that's one thing that really excites me. And so with that.
Yeah, and I know, Don, this whole Ask Me Anything webinar series is something you're really excited for too, and something we're actually hoping to do a lot more of. So we very much welcome your feedback. If you want to see more of these webinars, we really want to make that happen. But I do see a hand raised, Brad.
Okay.
So I'm going to go ahead, Brad, and promote you to a panelist, and then we'll just go ahead and get you to unmute and share your webcam, and we'll bring you on. Okay, hang on.
And while he's getting set up there, I have a question from Pablo who's saying, I'm pretty new to FME and I don't work directly with FME features, but I'm in charge of installing, configuring, deploying, and supporting FME Server. So I'm not sure if this webinar is for me. I would encourage you to stay on. I think there will be some content there for you, because we will talk a little bit about some of those things, I'm sure.
Yeah,
if you have a specific question,
and we do have the live chat, and if you are configuring it and you have any question at all, like, we really encourage people to just join us on that. And you are talking to a real person, you're not talking to a bot. And so you might, like Laura could be one. The first thing with FME Server, of course, is getting it installed, configured the way you want. And Laura's, and her team are that's one of the things that they're happy to do. So, yeah.
Brad, I'm not sure it's working, so I'm gonna send you back to attendee, and we will try again.
We have another person asking for a rough estimate of when 20.2 is released. So I love the keenness there.
Yeah. So how about that? When is FME 20.2 coming out?
It is estimated for November.
Okay. There you go. Yeah. And that'll be and then after that, I guess it's FME 2021. So yeah. So lots of good stuff coming in that one as well. So yeah.
Very exciting. Someone's asking, can FME Server connect easily to Kafka and Apache Airflow?
Oh, great question. Yeah, one of the exciting things, Kafka is in FME 2020 now. So you can run a workspace that'll connect to Kafka and process Kafka streams. You can deploy that to server and have that run. One of the exciting things in FME 2021, I think I'm allowed to talk about 2021, right, Aaron? Yeah. Okay. So I'll say that's a yes. She smiled. She didn't say no. So we're adding the whole support for streams. So you're going to see in FME Server now, you're going to see these things called data streams. And so this is, we're seeing data streams coming from everything. We're seeing them come from sensors, from IoT, from other systems. And so now in FME 2021, you're going to have a nice stream interface that will enable you to connect to these and you can dedicate engines to these streams and things like that. So yeah, so the answer to that is yes. Yeah.
And we have another question about, we're currently running a previous version of FME Server and we'd like to upgrade. Any suggestions? Laura, I think you probably get a lot of questions like that.
Yeah, it's a pretty common one. So the FME Server upgrade process does involve like a full uninstall of the old FME Server instance and then a reinstall of the new version. So yeah, some things I'd recommend is just making sure to take backups of everything before you go and get rid of your old server, so especially if you're doing an in-place upgrade where you're completely replacing the existing server. If you've done any special configuration, like setting up SSL certificates, you'll want to make sure to copy those certificates someplace safe before you uninstall. Yeah, and just kind of keep note of anything that you've customized within your FME Server install before you move forward with it.
Cool. And there's another one. So there's one about automations here. So this person is asking, I'm new to FME Server. Can triggers to run a workspace be configured to fire when a new data set is uploaded into the folder location of the source data set?
Yes, yes. Yes, absolutely. So you can configure the file watcher to trigger on when a file is there. You can even put filters, so you're looking for particular extensions on files. And then you can also do things like have filters within the automation if there's a lot of files being put in there. So yeah, the answer is yes, absolutely. And it's not just files. You could also do an FTP site, S3 bucket. And I think also with Azure, using Azure Event Grid, you can do things as well, right, Laura?
Yeah, that's right. So there's lots of different triggers for keeping track of where files are going. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the follow-up question here is, how do you handle the occurrence of the newly uploaded source file possibly having different file names than expected?
So in that case, you can set up filters within your workspace. You can, so any reader will let you set up, what do we call it, a merge filter. So you can configure it so it can take any type of file name. So you can set up kind of dynamic reading within your workspace to handle that.
Yeah, you could also put a filter in the automation too, and then route, if you were looking for particular extensions or particular form, you could put that in the automation as well. And then you could route the unexpected files to and I've done that to protect me from myself, because I built one automation. I was dumping my output in the same directory as my input. And of course that was causing my automation to trigger. And so then I put, and trying to process it. And so what I did is I just put a filter automation object in with the extension of the output file, and I made sure that that one was not sent through the rest of the pipeline. So yeah, so well, that's one of the challenges with FME, and that's where folks like Laura come in, is sometimes there's more than one way to do something, and then sometimes there's not a better way. There's just two different options, but sometimes there is a better way. And so we can help with those sorts of things too. Yeah.
Cool. And Steph said we have Simon has raised his hand. Would you like to ask a question on air, Simon?
Yes. Okay. I am going to. Okay. Wait. Simon has put his hand down, but James has his hand up, so we're gonna go with James. Let's do unmute. I'm gonna do unmute James.
Okay.
Okay. I'm not sure if
this is our first time.
He might not have the option to share a webcam, but
okay.
While you're setting that up, Steph, I have another question for the folks here. So any plans for real-time dashboards to visualize performance and see if specific workspaces are succeeding or failing from server metrics and job logs using the REST API, Don?
Oh, this feels like a planted question. Here. I love it.
Spoilers.
Yeah, that is a major theme of FME 2021. So in FME 2021, when you look at your workspaces, you're going to see how many times it ran, the maximum time it took, the percentage of CPU used, the maximum memory it's used, and things like that. And also in schedules as well. And every job log, now when you look at the job log, all that summary information is going to be there. So yeah, so take a look at that. And yeah, so you can even do crazy things like monitor queues. You can look historically through FME Server and then see you know, for up to a week right now, what the load was at any time in FME Server. So that's a big area. Yeah.
Sounds good.
Okay, Simon is back. We're gonna try once more with Simon because I don't think it was working. And
Okay.
if this doesn't work, it might not end up working the way we hoped. But
Okay.
Simon, I'm gonna make you a panelist
Okay.
and send you a prompt to share your webcam.
Okay. Hey there, Simon. Hey,
How's it going?
Simon.
I shared, I had my hand raised and I dropped it because I typed a question in the box, but then
Okay.
heard my name, so hand went back up again. So we've got an FME job that's calling a SOAP service, which works when we run it on the desktop from within the server that FME server is installed on. When we run it through schedule it through FME server, we're getting errors. We think it's
Okay.
related to permissions. So I'm just not sure if we can, is there a way with an FME server to associate like an internal AD account to the job? Because we've changed 2 of the processes on the server for FME to run from an admin account that we've got a bunch of permissions on a number of other servers.
Yeah.
But we could only change 2 of them. The first and the last one. Sorry, I should probably have it up so I could actually say the names. The middle 2 we couldn't. We had to leave it on just sort of the local account.
Right.
Otherwise, it wouldn't restart.
Yeah. So Laura, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so it's the FME server engine service. The account that's running that service is what's going to run your jobs. So that'll be the account. If the workspace is configured for Windows authentication, it'll use those credentials when it goes to run.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you'd have
That's
to
a really
make
good
sure.
question.
Yeah,
It comes up
yeah,
with data
the
connections
engine
with
has permission too. So yeah. So, and again, Simon, we'd be happy to, you know, work with you offline too and help get this going. That's a great question. And yeah, so the FME engine itself does, you know, run under a particular account. And so that FME engine has permission to whatever that account that it's running under has. And from time to time, we've had users who they just want particular jobs to have permission. And so you can do things. You can always install another engine and have a particular engine associated with a queue, and only that one has permission to do things. So all your other engines don't have. You know, and then you might say, well, geez, that causes me to chew up, you know, an engine, and I don't want to do that. And so then we could get into the whole discussion of, you know, all these different dynamic engine use cases that you see where users want these, you know, engines. We built it in the concept of them coming up and coming down because you buy per load. But if you had, you know, if you had a job which needed a particular permission and it only ran once in a while, you could just not have that engine even running, and then you could just bring it up, run the job, and then shut it down. You can do all sorts of things with dynamic engines. Yeah. So anyway.
Okay. No, that's good, because at the moment it's really just we're using it mostly for GIS and a couple of related platforms.
Yeah.
But people are seeing what we're doing. They're getting really excited with it. So I can see there's going to be a lot more people who are going to be wanting to start to use FME, which at that point we're going to need to have a little bit more restricted, you know, accounts that launch, that run the different activities with jobs.
Yeah. Interesting. So that's useful, because maybe what we all want to do is have permissions on queues, and then you could have these special engines on queues, and then only certain users would be able to launch a job on a particular queue, which would run on an engine with different permissions. I'll make a note of that. We can't do that right now, but that's why these AMAs are so great, because we get questions, the real questions from in the field, where, you know.
Especially when we start doing interactions with our SAP financial system.
Yes.
Really restrict them on which accounts can have write access to that.
That's right. And with FME Server, you can of course restrict the workspaces that somebody can run, but it would be really nice if you could also restrict the queue, so that, you know, only particular jobs can run on a queue and things like that. So okay, that's good.
Awesome.
Yeah, we're seeing that with FME Server more and more. We're seeing, you know, us grow beyond strictly our traditional spatial environment. Organizations are now seeing the value of FME Server, and it's pushing more and more into the enterprise at large. So it's
they're really starting to notice the ETL of the spatial ETL portion of it, which is great.
Yeah, and
Thanks, Simon.
automations and FME
Oh,
Server
sorry.
apps are a game changer. Yeah, sorry.
Sure.
Absolutely.
You can tell I could just talk forever. Yeah.
Awesome.
Cool,
Thanks
thanks
so
for
much,
coming on.
Simon, for coming on. I'm going to send you back to an attendee here.
Thanks, Simon.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thanks.
So we have lots of people pouring more questions in, which is really exciting. One is, are there any plans to make the integration between desktop and server tighter than it is today? For example, to facilitate using custom content in an easier way?
Yes. Yeah, so one thing we're doing is we're looking at, and when you get FME 2021, you'll notice there's this concept of author seats. And one of the things we're doing that is because then we want FME Server to be like, we're starting to think more and more about FME as a platform. And historically, we've, SAFE is viewed and we've promoted FME as a desktop and a server. And we kind of had this kind of, people start on desktop and then later on they get server. But that's more and more not what's happening. People are looking at the whole platform, they're buying the platform. And so now we're looking at how we can connect desktop to server better. One of the pains right now is every time you go to publish something to server, it asks you for the server credentials. And so that's one thing we're looking at, is just having a connection there. And if you want to switch servers, fine, but you should just be able to, when you got your workspace, you just hit a button and it's on server. Oh, I got excited. I almost knocked my computer on the floor. And yeah, so any thoughts on that, Laura?
Not really. Yeah, I think that's great. I think
Yeah.
seeing things go in that direction will be fabulous.
Yeah.
It'll be very powerful to have those two more tightly linked, definitely.
Yeah.
So Laura, one for you. This person's asking, we've been using FME mainly exclusively for our GIS application. Does FME Server connect into SAP, and can that help with a financial data pipeline space to enable more self-serve data wrangling and automation?
Okay. So I'm not 100% sure about the SAP formats. Dawn, do you know? I think we do connect to that. We have a reader writer.
Yeah, we have SAP HANA for sure. And I know we have clients who've just gone right to the database because it's reading. And so reading from the underlying database, is pretty safe. I wouldn't recommend writing into that, doing that, but we do have customers who've done that. Yeah, so that's how people at this point have done SAP. Now SAP HANA, we read and write, but generally people, when they mention SAP, they're not referring to SAP HANA. So yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And are we planning to add support for a Google Drive watcher?
That's a good one.
That's a good
We'd
one.
probably use that at
Yeah.
here.
So yeah. So,
yeah.
Our plan is to be completely platform agnostic across the cloud. So just as we are on the desktop, we run in Win32, although not many people run Win32, Win64, Linux, Docker, Kubernetes in the cloud. And you'll see in the cloud now we have, in the marketplace, we have FME Server on Google Cloud, we have FME Server on Azure Marketplace as well, both as a single machine deployment and a multi-machine deployment. And then of course we have our FME Cloud, which is run on Amazon. And looking out, within this next year, we expect to have FME Server on the AWS Marketplace as well. And people might say, well, why do you have it on the Marketplace when it's already FME Cloud? Well, these things in the marketplaces, you can run them inside your VPCs, your virtual private clouds. And so then it's not hanging out, on the internet like FME Cloud is. And that's a big deal for certain organizations. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
just
related
circling
to that,
quickly. Sorry.
Go ahead, Laura.
Just circling quickly back to that Google Drive Watcher. I think it's a good chance to kind of plug our ideas page on the community. So definitely for things like that, if it's not in there already as an idea, go in there, put that in, get some votes, and you can see the level of interest for adding these. Like I can see this one being a popular one for sure.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. And related to your answer you were giving, Dawn, there's another question coming in that says, when will dynamic engines be available on FME Cloud?
Yeah, that is a great question. And the answer is not anytime soon. And there's some, FME Cloud is, what it does is it launches a single instance. Within that single instance, you can start as many engines and bring them up and bring them down. And we do not charge for engines on FME Cloud. but I know what people want. They would like to start another machine and then bring engines up and down, and that. And so at this point, we've talked about that internally. We're watching some Amazon, technology. It's about how we've mounted the drive, and so, but it's not there yet. So, and that's another reason why we're going with these marketplaces as well. So then they just give people total flexibility to bring things up and down. If you look about the cloud and scaling, on Amazon, for example, there's Fargate, which is completely serverless. And so we're looking at Fargate on EC2, and we're also looking to support Fargate on Amazon's Kubernetes stack. So those are serverless solutions, and we see that's the way going, with containerization being a really big thing. And we do right. You can run Kubernetes on all the platforms, so we've tested them on Google's, Azure, and AWS, and some organizations have deployed, so we know it's production ready. So yeah, so hopefully that helps.
Cool. Another question is, how can I use REST or SOAP to trigger an automation, monitor it, and be notified at the end?
So for triggering, so we do have, what is it called? We have a webhook trigger within automations, and that provides a URL endpoint. So you can use something like another REST API or another application to send a post request to that URL, and then FME can get that data and then cause the rest of the automation to finish or to continue through. So yeah, that's one option for that. To be notified at the end, we do have, we can send an HTTP request at the end. So we have another action for that. So you can send information back to another endpoint. So if you wanted to send information about what happened in that automation back to another API call, you could send that through when everything's finished in the automation. So it could be something like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I've set up some where I run them. With our new FME server gallery, you can actually set up a URL endpoint to run an automation. So I did that. And then at the end, I had it just send me a Slack message, which is just using exactly what Laura said, an HTTP. And then I have some automations, whenever they go wrong, they send me a Slack message. And I need to refine that a little bit, because sometimes I'll look over and I have like 500 Slack messages. So, but that's on me, the author. I should be a little bit smarter, but yeah.
And another question is, what's the recommended way to set up ArcPy for Arcmap and ArcGIS Pro on FME Server?
Okay, so it's setting up the Python interpreter to use for Workspace. So the way we'd recommend is to configure that directly within the workspaces as you're building them. So in your workspace, in the navigator, under the workspace parameters, and I think it's under scripting, there's a Python compatibility setting. So in there, you can configure it to point to whichever Python interpreter you'd like to run, and that'll tell FME Server which interpreter to load when it goes to run the workspace. So you can set that for any workspace that needs a specific version of Python, and that should get it going.
And we've done some work on engines, I think, to do the right thing now, which was because, it could have the wrong interpreter already loaded, and so then some magic happens to get the right one loaded. So yeah. You could also do it. You could also have different machines again with the old Arc and then the new Arc Pro and a different one with the different Python interpreters. But Laura's is the recommended approach for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a simpler way to do it. I think in the past we had some commands that you have to run to set registry entries, and it's better not to touch that at this point. Just keep it simple.
And that's the difference between Laura and me, right? Like Laura lives in the trenches, so some of my ideas, she's like, oh my goodness, that's too complicated. Why don't we just set the interpreter in the workspace and it would just work?
Someone else is asking, is there a way to read or expose the FME server parameters? We've had a few questions similar to this coming in.
So I think a good number of those are exposed within the workspace. If you check under the user parameters, there's a set of FME server parameters. So it's one way to get them.
Yeah.
Not sure.
And then I guess you could log them. If you could grab them, fetch them all. There's a parameter fetcher. You could fetch them all and then log them within the workspace. Is that what they're thinking, Aaron? Does that
Yeah,
sound
maybe
like?
if you want more details, maybe send us a question
Yeah.
with a bit more information in it. We can answer more
Yeah, and I had
specifically.
to do that on Docker sometimes. I couldn't figure out why something didn't run. And so then I use a parameter fetcher to fetch every FME server parameter and then dump it. And then I realized that I had my host set to localhost. And of course, within a container, localhost is just a container. It isn't going to go all the way back out to our REST API. So, but yeah, it's a good debugging trick sometimes to figure out what exactly the engine's getting. Yeah.
I have a follow-up here from Sean about the Python question. So he's asking for clarification. What Esri software needs to be on the server to make ArcPy for Python 3.x available?
So I think ArcGIS Enterprise should have Python 2.7 as well as 3. something. So that's one option. And I think Arc Pro would also have Python 3.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So we have another question that says, going back on FME server triggers, I work in the fiber industry and we're building out a statewide fiber backbone. We use Esri SDE on SQL with SQL Server. Would server be able to fire when one of our entries in our feature class becomes construction complete, that it would then be able to automatically take that particular line, export it to shapefile, and then place it into an FTP for 811 for call before you dig? That was a big one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess
So he wants
it'll
a
depend on
database
what construction
trigger.
complete
Yeah.
means. So yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, does that, I'm guessing that's probably as built. Like we're saying when construction is complete, then we have our kind of updated finalized file.
Yeah.
Mm.
Can you have
I
a
know
database
there.
trigger on that, Laura?
Yeah.
That could do that, but you'd.
I know, yeah, if you can set one up, I don't know how SDE works for that. I know we have worked with setting up automatic database triggers on like straight up like SQL Server or Oracle or Postgres databases, so you can send data to trigger an automation when new records are added or when something changes in a table. So that could be possible. I don't know how it would work in SDE specifically, but we could check into that if that's an option. I guess the other thing is you could set up something like a schedule to just go and check on the status of that. It's a little bit less efficient, but it's one way to do that. So you can just ping it every so often just to see what's going on in that table. And then when it's finally ready, you can trigger the rest of the workflow to run.
Okay. Yeah, thanks, Laura. Steph, you've got someone else to come on with a question. Oh, we can't hear you yet.
I'm muted. Okay. I am going to promote Divya. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I'm going to promote you to a panelist and we'll bring you on to ask a question. Okay, and here, I'm going to send you request and an unmute request. While they're getting set up, Erin, was there another question? Oh, wait, we're good.
We're here. Awesome. Welcome, Divya.
Oh, we can't hear
like...
you. Hang on. Oh, I don't think your audio is working. Might need to check the.
Here, I'll ask a question while.
Oh, there we go. Hello.
Thank you. Yeah, we are very new to FME Server. We are in a process of purchasing one for our organization, but we have a desktop with us. We want to do a lot of automation. So one of the bit is we have a web application which is built using JavaScript API, Esri JavaScript API. So if user selects an extent of a map, and we want that extent to go to FME Server, and then bring up the Workbench and get the DWG of that, whatever the selected extent, interacting with the feature class. I'm sure it is doable, but not sure how to go about.
Absolutely. Yeah, we actually have some examples online of how to do that. So we can provide some links for our playground. I think we can send that out so you can see some code samples of how to do that. But yeah, it's totally possible through the REST API for FME Server. So within your JavaScript, all you need to do is grab what that bounding box of that area the user's selected is, and then you can pass that into a workspace as a published parameter value and then process that. So we have some information about how to do that. So Yeah.
Okay, that's nice. Thank you. And then I have just one more question, please. And how FME, how good is it with machine learning?
Machine learning.
Great question.
Nice. Don,
Yeah,
do you know much about that? Okay.
Yeah, so our strategy there is to there is some machine learning transformers within FME Server, but our strategy there in general is to embrace the cloud services that on Azure, AWS, or Google or others, and then leverage the amazing machine learning services some within there. So again, if you have particular things you would like us to work with you on, that would be great. That's an exciting area, and of course, training these things requires tons of data. And FME can be an amazing pipeline to get all your, your successes and failures and train the system. But that's our strategy, not to create our own machine learning technology, but to leverage all of the great work that that others are doing. And that's what FME really is this amazing platform for integration. And then you can decide what machine learning tools work for you. And then with FME, we ensure that you can get the data to it. Yeah. So that would be an interesting follow-on discussion as well. What machine learning systems have you looked at? Yeah.
Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you so much for joining us.
Send you back to an attendee. Thanks so much for coming online. Yeah, what great questions. I think Dimitri had a webinar actually that included some machine learning as well.
Yeah, was it a world tour presentation or a webinar? We can send the link out.
It's out there, but great questions for sure. All right, Erin, I'll pass it off to you. We'll do some Q&A again, and then if anyone wants to raise their hand, we'll maybe check back in around 8:45.
Sounds good. So the next question is, I've heard Safers talk about application integration. Is that similar to enterprise integration, and how is it different from data integration?
Great question. Yeah, so our traditional FME desktops real strength is data integration. Yeah, you can connect to REST APIs and and that sort of thing. We have you can use it to basically do a lot of stuff at low level and higher level, but automations itself really is all about connecting applications. So if we look at tools like CityWorks, and things like that, there's just or email, or you want to Slack or Jira or Atlassian or things like that, and you want to start to bring all of these things together. That's really where FME Server starts to connect these applications, and it's really simple in the sense that the idea is you want something to happen in one application, and then rather than having to have some manual process that you trigger, just automatically moves the data to these other applications. And and that's really exciting. The other thing that automations enable you to do is, rather than have massive workspaces that do a whole bunch of steps, you can now break it down into smaller modules. So we're seeing that, and automations are inherently parallel. So if you have a trigger that has then 3 workspaces, they really can run at the same time. Whereas something within Workbench, it really is a single. There's one thing happening at a time. I mean, it's so fast sometimes it feels like many things are going on, but really it is inherently a sequential system, even though the graph might look like it's parallel. So I'd say that the engine side its strength is really data integration, and automations are really about connecting applications, and applications are what enterprises run, so we tend to interchange it with enterprise integration. Yeah, and enterprise integration, probably, if we look at Gartner, it probably is data integration and application integration.
Yeah, that's how they look at it. And I would say too, like, to add to your comments about kind of like desktop versus server, like engine versus automations, enterprise integration patterns are something we introduced support for this year. And the idea of event-driven workflows that are based on kind of common standard ways that people move information. It doesn't really matter if it's data integration being done or application integration being done. FME can automate them both with event-driven workflows, right? So I don't know if that helps anyone with clarity on that.
No, that's great. And the classic example is, the directory watch, right? Or something like S3, where you could do it on desktop, but you'd have to have a scheduler that would run periodically and check the files and then somehow figure out what was new and all these sorts of things. Whereas server, you just pointed at one of those and then automatically the data comes across. Now, for some of them, it is polling, like FTP was probably as old, might even be older than me. And so when it was created, it was not, there was no, it had no concept of automation. So it's only supports polling. And so on some of those, you have to be careful. You don't want to, I know I beat up our FTP server once by just trying to be too aggressive with, setting a polling like at 1 second or something. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's awesome. Is it possible to have an Excel spreadsheet called FME Server as a web service in order to pull data into a spreadsheet?
So for the Excel side of that, I don't know exactly how that works, but assuming that there's a way in Excel to call a web service to get data, then you can do that with FME Server. So we have basically all you need to do is create a workspace that creates whatever kind of data that you would want to pull into your Excel spreadsheet and have that registered with the FME data streaming service so that any call that goes to that, when it does a get, it'll just get that data streamed directly back to that application. So that's how you'd set that up, assuming you got the Excel part down. So
awesome.
Yeah.
I see another one that just came in that has been the subject of a fair bit of discussion around here. Do you see adding a dashboard or calendar to see and document the schedules of all jobs?
Mm-hmm. I feel like I saw something related to that
Yeah.
recently. Yeah, Dawn, go ahead.
Yeah, so that again is in 2021, there's this whole notion of being able for you to easily see when your server, was busy or when it is busy. So there might be periods during days when, your server's really busy. So as you create schedules, you want to pick the times where it's quieter. And that was, that was hard enough when the only thing that really server ran was schedules, right? That in the early days, that's what server really was schedules. But now we've added these other things that give the load, that remove the load of the server from the administrator. So automations, for example. I mean, when is the server busy using automations? Well, when the triggering applications are busy. So if there's times during the day when the triggering applications are busy, then your server's going to be busy. The other thing we did was created FME Server apps. And again, that gives the control of the load of FME Server to the users. And we've had some cities who have created FME Server apps, and in the morning, or there's particular times when they're really, really busy. And so then the server's really busy. And so, but by using this historic, this ability to check the history and the calendar view we're working to build, you'll be able to see, what days are busiest, and then drill in and see what times during the days are busiest, and, and things like that. Yeah. And that's also why we did dynamic engines, because sometimes you might have a real peak during the day where you need 10 engines, but the rest of the day you only need, say 2 engines, and having to buy 8 engines just to handle these peaks is not really, it doesn't really make a lot of sense. And so with dynamic engines, you can just pay for the work you do and do it that way. Yeah.
Cool. Thanks, Don. What is the recommended way for FME Server to integrate with database transactions such as an insert, delete, or update?
But that, I guess it depends on kind of what direction you're thinking of going with these. So if you want to just run database transactions, such as inserting those new records or deleting or updating, I'd leave that to the workspace level to handle. So you'd let your database writer handle those transactions. If you're thinking of kind of monitoring for changes in your database table, so when new records are inserted, deleted, or updated, in that case, you could look at something like setting up a database trigger within your database. So you could have it kind of monitor for changes in a specific table and then send out information about what happened to like a webhook trigger within an automation or directly to a workspace as well.
Yeah. We also have the SQL executor, which you can use to execute arbitrary SQL on any database. And my SQL is FlexStar from blah. So I'm not a SQL expert by any stretch, but I've visited clients and they have these SQL statements. Well, they look like programs to me because they go on for pages and pages, and so they're able to test them within the SQL environment and just cut and paste them into the SQL executor and then just execute them. And FME Server or FME does not get in the way of the SQL. It just passes it untouched to the engine. Well, I shouldn't say untouched, because sometimes what you're doing is you're pulling values from a record and then using it to replace key values within the SQL. So it can be a data-driven SQL statement. But so, yeah, so those are all the options. Again, great questions, and we could follow up more on after to learn exactly what you're doing. Databases, obviously, as we move to the enterprise, are hugely important. Every enterprise is running on databases of some kind, and we want to make sure that that FME, server, engine, desktop does all that. Yeah.
Oh,
You're muted.
You're muted, Erin.
Thank you. When writing to a database in FME Workbench, is it possible to ignore failed features and write them to an FFS file? If features are ignored and written to this file, is there a way in FME Server automations to acknowledge the error to send an email, even though the translation was successful?
So in Workbench, yeah, there is that option to ignore failed features. So that probably would handle that first bit. I'm not completely sure about what context the file, like the data gets written to an FFS for that. I think as long as it's logged, it would.
Does the feature writer give us any ability to know what wasn't able to be written, Laura? I'm just curious.
I don't think so, since that's on the writer side. I don't think it knows what couldn't, yeah, what failed to write. So yeah, we'd have to check into that a bit more.
Yeah, that's a great question. That is a great question. Yeah. And also even on the automation side, one thing we've been working with on the automation side is you'll notice now everything has a success and failed port. And we're trying to identify the things that people would like to know in either of those cases downstream in the automation to take further action. So this one, raises a lot of interesting questions. Like is the this is a question I have for Laura. Is some of this information about the number of failed features, is that dumped into a log file?
Yeah, I think it should be. So it might depend on the writer itself, but you should see warning messages saying failed to write X number of features. So you could scan through the log to find those messages.
Right. So you could have one workspace that ran, and then you could have another workspace that would grab the log file and process it, subsequently. So not ideal, but yeah, there might be something you can do there. That's a great question. Yeah.
And there's another one from the same person. When running FME server automations and an FME workspace happens to fail, is there a way to capture the error message so that so they can be used in an email?
Yeah, for that one, yeah, you could make use of the failure port within the automation for that. There's a few different output keys that are included, which include, I think, the status message, as well as a link to, or as well as where the log file went. So you could include just a basic status, this was a failure, and what the error message was. And then you could also attach that log file to an email if you wanted to as well.
Cool. So someone is saying, I'm new to FME Server, just wanted to know how we can pass the polygon graphics drawn on the web application to FME Server so it can do the intersection with other feature classes and produce the output in DWG format and mail it to the user.
I think that sounds like the question from Divya as well. So
okay, sorry, maybe that was a different.
That's a total popular use case, right? So it's a great, yeah, no worries, Erin. That's fantastic.
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks for catching that, Laura.
Oh, no worries. Yeah. Yeah, like for that, it's just a published parameter, really. You can put that in as well-known text and pass it into the workspace or something like that to keep it simple. Yeah.
Sounds good. Other than scheduling and notifications, what do you, Laura, see most customers using FME Server for?
Outside of scheduling and notifications, yeah, I think it's the self-serve kind of workflows where you want to kind of create a workspace where end users can go in and request data that they need. So they can just come in, kind of click a link to a workspace and server, set some published parameters and get what they need right away. So I think that's probably one of the more common ones, is just the self-serve scenario where you don't have to manually run jobs every time someone needs some data processed.
Mm-hmm. And it's so easy to set up an FME Server app. It's incredible. Yeah. So fast. Yeah, so that you can do that. Okay,
yeah,
so we have
it
another
is. And people ask us about that all the time. And our whole goal there is no code. So, and we're sticking pretty firm to that, because the idea is there's a lot of people out there who don't know how to write code, but they can get access to the graphics and make pretty websites that look like their environment and are FME users. And yeah, so there's, when people see FME apps, often they'll ask, oh, can I write code to do that? And the answer is yes, of course. We have a nice REST API, but we're really working hard to ensure that FME Server apps and the gallery apps, which both of those are continue to be evolved, is a purely no code experience for users. So that makes it hard on the team here, on their developers, but we're all creative and having fun building it. Yeah.
So we have a fun question that just came in a couple minutes ago. I'll retire in 2021, but might want to play with FME Desktop and Server on a personal level for non-commercial projects. Would it be possible to run a home version of Server? I love questions like that.
Absolutely. Yeah. So yeah, the FME Home program is mostly people running desktop, but yeah, if you want FME Server to run on your laptop and play around at home for learning or pilots, or just maybe you have a great business idea, we're happy to do that. I run FME Server on my MacBook Pro in Docker, and I can enable the Docker Compose, enables me to play around with dynamic engines and all this stuff. So absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, we've seen some pretty fun stuff with home use licenses, that's for sure.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Yeah.
Yeah. Another great question, will it be possible in the future to use the data download service in combination with the streaming service? So basically, some writers using the streaming service and some provide the content of the download service all in the same workspace.
Ooh, so run it once and get both streamed content and the zip file with the data. That's an interesting one.
Yeah. The only way I think you could do it now would be to have an FME writer first that would write the data download, then grab the links and then write it to the streaming service. So you'd have to register it as a streaming service, and then part of the HTTP or the web code you send back to the browser would have the link in it. So yeah. So but it's a manual thing. There's no just configuring a dialogue and making it happen. Yeah.
Okay.
Interesting.
Don, where do you see FME Server in 5 years?
Oh, wow. So yeah, so you're seeing some of the things we're working on that are taking us to the future. So dynamic engines are a key piece, being able to scale the capabilities of a server on demand. And with Kubernetes is exciting about that. And that's why we're doing all this metric stuff. That's another one. Aside from giving users the ability to see what's going on, we want server itself to be able to predict, to know when it thinks that load is going to be there, and have these engines ready when the work arrives, so that then the server itself can go up and down, and also know when it can shut down engines. And so those two things are really linked. So they're not being done sort of at random. It's part of a master plan. Where we'd like to get to would be, even for evaluations, it would be really nice if we just had one server out there and people could just online just register with their email account in whatever that may be, publish workspaces to the server, and it would just all work going up and down. The other thing with dynamic engines is now we know, the amount of time each workspace takes. So, which means we know the amount of time that each user takes. So there's lots of opportunities even for us within an organization. So an administrator would be able to go in and see who are the biggest FME Server users, right? Who's using it the most? Because obviously then you know who to talk to when you're making changes, to ask about load questions and things like that. And that will also ultimately enable us to do things like have a true SaaS solution for FME Server, where then users would be able to, pay for the amount of jobs they do, because the FME Server now is tracking the amount of CPU time and the amount of runtime that each user has, and then they could, you could imagine, that being billed back. So those are sort of where we're going with FME Server. There are things we need to do aside from the load around security and around, namespace collisions. Right now in FME Server, if you create I can't say an automation, because automations are actually the way of the future. It's like I could have an automation called test, and Laura could have an automation call test and they wouldn't collide, but other things are not like that, like schedules, right? So if I create a schedule called the best schedule ever, then all Laura can do is create a schedule called the second best schedule ever, because that name has been taken. So we're looking at, users will still see those names, but under the covers, there will be like Google Docs, there'll be UUIDs that are there that users mostly don't see. So those are just some of the things. The other things is this whole concept of remote engines, and we have some prototypes working. This won't make it for 2021, but the idea there is you could have an FME server running anywhere, and you could deploy engines wherever you want. So you might have an FME server running on-prem or in the cloud or in one cloud, but you need to talk to another cloud. You could just deploy an FME server engine over there, and it would be part of yours, and then you'd be able to route jobs over there. Data gravity is real. We talk about that a lot at SAFE. And FME engines like to be close to the data, and you get better performance. And so the closer we can do that, the better. We're seeing hybrid environments a lot now as organizations migrate to the cloud. They still have major data inside the prem, and they're on-prem, and then they have data in the cloud, and they want to bridge that gap. And right now, the best is having a server on both, or deciding where you put it, and the other one does pay a price for the increased latency and decreased bandwidth. So yeah, just some of the things. Yep.
Cool. I think we have time for 2 more questions. I see 2 here that are pretty widely applicable. One is, can FME server apps be set up to dynamically display data and then record feedback from a user? So for example, a GIS data set that needs to be manually reviewed and the source data updated based on the reviewer's response.
That would be cool. I don't think it's possible just yet. Don, what do you think?
Yeah, I think, yeah, that would be cool. We'll have to think about that one. That's yeah.
Yeah, because I think I've set up these kind of multi-step processes before where you scan the data and then provide a form, and yeah, that basically involved a decent amount of JavaScript and the data streaming service. So it wasn't super simple to put together, but definitely something to think about.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. And perhaps the last one here, I know we're coming up close to the top of the hour. So SAFE is always talking about how much performance has improved. And this person actually witnessed a specific example of moving from desktop 2017 to 2020.1. And the 2017 version had failed to scan 20 million log files, and 2020.1 worked through it like a blaze. So they've seen this firsthand, and they're wondering, does this apply to FME Server too?
Right. So I guess like the slow part in any process is generally the job itself that's processing the data. So any changes that happen on desktop for better performance would apply to server, as it uses the same engine behind the scenes. Yeah.
Yeah, and we're always working on performance. That's one of our top things we want to see.
Absolutely. Yeah, I've never had a user say to me, FME is too fast, right? Or be disappointed when we make it faster, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's kind of funny now. Now when we use FME desktop or server, we're getting used to these trailblaze, this amazing performance. And so now every once in a while we'll hit a flow where that optimization hasn't been made yet, and now it feels so slow. But 5-6 years ago, that was the FME speed, and they thought the performance was great. So yeah, so Dale and the team over there on the engine side, they are really working hard to make every release of FME faster than the previous release, and that's never going to end. I don't think. You can always tweak your algorithms. You can always multi-thread better than you did before, and things like that. And then if you look out further, we have this thing called Innovation Days at SAFE, where we shut down development for a week, and developers are able to do whatever they want. And we've had some look at how can we harness the power of GPUs for those algorithms that that makes sense. At this point we haven't, but when it comes to performance, there's always things you can do to make the engine faster. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, I think we're at about 1 minute to the top of the hour here. So thanks everyone for sending in all of your questions. There were a few we couldn't ask on air. We just didn't have time. So definitely we will be following up with each of you to make sure that you have your question answered. And if we need to help you in support with an individual walkthrough, absolutely, we will make sure we do that for you.
Yeah. So thank you so much, as Aaron said. And for some of you, the questions might be so in depth that we're going to want to get on a call. So if you're able to do that, we'd ask first, of course, before we just start dialing or reaching out. But because you know, all of you are working, building real solutions, and we always get excited about, okay, let's understand that one more detailed and really drill in, because really we view, you know, all our users as our partners as far as solving these problems. And truly, one of the things we all miss at SAFE with the current, you know, travel restrictions is not being able to just meet people randomly at conferences or at world tours and talking about, you know, things like that. So this is part of what's driving this whole AMA thing. It's also a lot of fun. So, but you know, so there you go. Yeah.
Totally. Okay, last question from me is, aside from this webinar, if anyone has additional questions, what is the best way to reach you guys? Maybe Laura? Are there certain locations where experts can be found aside from AMA webinars?
Absolutely. Yeah, so there's several different ways. So we have our community, first of all. So you can always ask any kind of how-to questions. If you've got specific scenarios where you're just looking for some advice on what to do, you can always post there. Our experts team is in there pretty frequently, so we'll answer any questions that come up there as well. And it opens it up to the wider range of other FME users out there and some of our partners as well. So you get a very broad variety of different types of input from that. So it's definitely a great place to go. We also have a live chat, as Dawn had mentioned earlier. So if you want to ask some quick questions and get some pointers on where to go to look for information, you can always chat with us through there, so you can reach an expert live. And we also have our support forums. You can always access support and create a support case with us if you're having kind of difficulties. If you've got actual issues you'd like to report, or you'd like some help troubleshooting something that you've seen go wrong, you can reach out to us through that as well. So lots of options.
Yeah, totally. Especially if something's a little more technical, the support might be a great option. But yeah, I saw Rob, another AMA in a month or so. That is the plan. We plan to do these, hopefully every single month is going to be the plan, maybe the first of every month. So if you have a topic that you would love to see us do, let us know, because we are in the process of fleshing out all the webinars for the next year, and we love to incorporate your suggestions. Actually, one of the upcoming webinars we have in November is only happening because the audience requested it. So you guys have a lot more power, I think, than you even know. So definitely let us know what topics you're interested in. But I think then with that, what I'll do is I will close this down, but if there were any last questions that anyone wanted to get in, I'll leave it running for 5 minutes so you can go ahead and type it in. And with that, we'll talk to you in email or in the community or on live chat. Cool.
Great.
Thanks team.
Everybody.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.